longer than expected. Just bear with us, please. We'll get started probably in about 5 minutes. All right, welcome everyone for Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for March 25th. I will just ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest or natures thereof. All right, seeing none. The consent item, limiting distance agreement for 630 Bennington Drive. Can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Johnston, Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And on to the public meeting. So this is a note for delegations who have registered in the meeting for the state. While public participation is welcomed at meetings, we are committed to engaging in a respectful and constructive dialogue with members of the community, and conducting yourself in any of the following manners may result in an immediate removal from the meeting, which are interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for the delegations: please do not take offense if following a presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. As part of this public meeting, as a reminder, this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submission to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I'll proceed to 5.1, which is the official plan amendment application, zoning bylaw amendment application, enabling 4 units. We have presentation from staff first, which would be I think Katie Andrell, project manager. And Katie, whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes. To members of the committee, we also have other staff in attendance, which is Ms. Bustamante and Ungrang Kandewal and Arwa Alzur. Katie, whenever you're ready.
Through the chair, good evening. The Enabling 4 Units team is here today, and we're pleased to present for your consideration official plan and zoning bylaw amendments that would have the effect of enabling 4 units on lots that currently contain single detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwellings. This work was prepared in response to Council's direction in October and is a key action of the City's Housing Accelerator Fund application. Enabling 4 units is a bold response to the housing crisis. The proposed zoning has been carefully crafted to provide for meaningful and responsible change in neighborhoods. It is carefully balanced to enable more housing and also preserve livability. Tonight, the recommendations focus on enabling gentle intensification of missing little housing in our community areas. Enabling 4 units helps to fulfill the City's municipal housing pledge and aligns with recommendations of the Missing Middle and Affordable Housing Study. The work is informed by research and included consultation with the community and the development industry. The majority of lands in the City of Kitchener are low-rise, low-density. 80% of lots are single-detached dwellings, and 90% of lots only contain 1 unit. Sorry, that's jumping ahead. There is opportunity for intensification in our existing neighborhoods. This could include renovation of existing buildings to add a unit in the basement. It can include rear yard dwellings, and it can also include, sorry, this is progressing on its own. It can also include additions to dwellings and purpose-built 4 units. The proposed zoning bylaw, there's a proposed official plan amendment that would permit up to 3 additional units on a lot. And this is in addition to policies put in place in 2023 that permitted 3 units on a lot. This would permit up to 4. And the proposed zoning bylaw amendment makes changes in a number of key areas, one of which is parking. So staff are recommending a geography-based approach to parking that recognizes less parking is needed when properties are located close to LRT or in the central city. Staff are also recommending more flexibility for how parking is organized on a lot without supporting driveway widenings, but it could include parking closer to the street, as well as additional opportunities for parking in rear yards. And to help support reductions to parking, we're also recommending a new class of secure bike parking that ensures that residents will have a secure weather-protected place to park bicycles that is not as onerous as our current Class A bike parking requirements. Parking requirements are a large driver of lot size, and staff have given careful consideration to the size of lots that's required to support additional units. In our central city areas and near transit, where parking is not as much parking is required, we recommend deferring to the base zoning. In more suburban areas, we would recommend a minimum lot area of 10.5 meters and an area of 360 square meters. We feel that this is an appropriate lot size to support the number of parking spaces and would support a double-width driveway, as well as other important site functions, including walkways and landscaping. We've also given consideration to the regulations that are already in place for additional dwelling units. These have been in place since about 2021, and over the last few years, we've had a chance to learn from the regulations that are in place, to understand how they're working. And based on our experiences, as well as variances and the different projects that we've seen come forward, we can also recommend that ADUs are appropriate on smaller size lots, the same lot sizes that I've just gone over. In addition, we'd recommend allowing up to 2 units in a detached additional dwelling, as well as providing for a slightly increased height of an additional 1.5 meters in areas where principal dwellings are already higher. And this could allow a unit above parking spaces in a detached garage. It could allow for a raised bungalows type of dwelling, and provides additional flexibility and options to homeowners. So the proposed regulations create a regulatory framework that will enable more housing. However, as a next step, staff are recommending several measures that would support homeowners and builders to actually build more units. We recommend developing tools and resources that will support building and operating units. Staff will also continue to work with our partners in building and in other divisions to streamline review, approval, and inspection processes, as well as monitoring implementation and uptake to ensure that our processes, bylaws, and the services that support them continue to be appropriate for the additional units. The proposed zoning before you this evening enables an increased supply of rental units in our existing neighborhoods in a gentle way, promotes efficient use of land and infrastructure, maintains neighborhood characteristics such as front yard setbacks, lot sizes, and building heights. It works to balance density with space for trees, landscaping, and private amenity. It allows an income source for homeowners, but most importantly, the new unit options will allow households to make choices about where they live, about aging in place and multi-generational living, and most importantly, having a place to call home. The Enabling 4 Units project supports what is valuable. So staff recommend approval of the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendments. They're consistent with the provincial policy statement, conform to the growth plan, the regional official plan, and the city's official plan, and represent good planning. And our team is here this evening to answer any questions that you might have.
We'll hold questions of staff. Katie, just leave your mic on, it'll be easier for later.
Sure.
We'll hold questions of staff until the delegation. We have Kim Charlesworth. Welcome, Kim. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you. I live in the St. Mary's Heritage District, home to all the tiny veterans' houses. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to how Enabling 4 Units initiative moves forward in Kitchener. Kudos to staff who are doing a remarkable job with all the major planning processes underway in this city. I'm here to say that I support this initiative as one tool in the toolbox to help address our housing crisis. It's important that we use all the tools that we have. It is also important to ensure that as we move forward on the housing crisis, we don't forget the other really big crisis that we're all trying to deal with, which is the climate crisis. According to the 2019 data from the Climate Action Waterloo region, residential homes contribute approximately 40% of the greenhouse gases produced here in Waterloo region. And that means that any changes to policy, procedures, bylaws, etc. regarding buildings, and in this case houses, and land use in general will have an impact on whether we are working at reducing our GHGs or actually making the climate crisis worse. Intensification intensification helps the housing crisis, no doubt about it. And this is a good initiative. Intensification along public transit corridors also helps the climate crisis by reducing emissions from transportation. We can make the Enabling 4 Units initiative 5-star amazing, even as we expand outwards from those corridors, by also ensuring that both new construction and renovations follow green development standards. I'm well aware of the work that's being done by various municipalities, including the City of Kitchener, with regards to GDS, and in most cases, that work is going much too slowly. With the amount of housing development occurring in Kitchener, which this initiative will hopefully add to, we need to ensure that green development standards are baked into the process. They can include anything from landscaping issues, energy efficiency in buildings, water and waste management, integrating access to active transportation. My ask is that in advance of the green development standards being more broadly adopted with the work that's being done, select the ones that have the highest benefits to be included in this initiative until they are more broadly adopted. In particular, firstly, no natural gas extensions in either new construction or renovations. Any new heating and cooling configurations must be electric, preferably using heat pumps, especially since the cost of heat pumps has been clearly shown to generally be earned back within a very reasonable period of time. Secondly, ensure that within the 30% of the rear yard that is proposed as reserved for landscaping, including private amenity spaces, that hard surfaces must be permeable. And lastly, please be aware of the implications of increasing density in areas that are not currently well served with public transportation. Please consider expanding public transit and other active transportation infrastructure in those areas. Thank you for your time and attention. Keep up the good work.
There's a question of you, Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and thank you so much for coming in. Really, really good ideas. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit. Many of these properties I can foresee are in communities where bungalows were built in the 50s. I live in one of those myself, and looking to make it more energy efficient is always a challenge. I had REAP come in and do an audit, etc. Maybe you can talk about a little bit about how you would look at specifically those bungalows and what to do with those.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Those
what
kind
about,
of like that older housing stock.
like I have.
Yeah, and like I have as well.
Yes. Well, with respect to the zoning and what we're talking about here this evening, permeable surfaces and driveways, and if you're paving over backyards in order to provide parking for vehicles, then those surfaces need to be permeable. The biggest thing is getting away from natural gas as heating and cooling. So again, making sure that the extensions or the renovations, whatever is going into creating these new units, use electricity for heating and cooling. Beyond that, the kinds of things that the REAP House does, which is around insulation and water heaters, all of those kinds of things, they're doing a really good job as well.
Thank you.
Kim, that's everyone. Thank you very much. Appreciate you presenting and bringing forward your suggestions. And that's all the delegations that are as registered. I will just bring the attention to the committee for a written submission from Michael Brisbane. That would have been received by the committee. And I'll open it up for questions of staff. Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you. I want to start by just confirming. I think we got an email earlier saying that this actually does need to be approved as part of special council later this afternoon. Is that correct?
Mr. Reedman, do you want to answer?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. This is one of our HAF initiatives and needs to be completed by the first quarter.
Okay, not faulting staff because those timelines aren't entirely within our control, but I guess my first question would be, I was actually looking forward to having a bit of time to stew on this and between committee and council. So I guess my question would be, would it be possible to request that whatever we approve, to approve something today and have it come back in maybe a year's time for revision? Would that still meet the qualifications of the funding?
Through the chair, so council essentially approved a similar version to this over a year ago, which was adding ADUs to the backyard and so the backyards, and that covered 48% of the residential properties in Kitchener. And so this does increase the level slightly, but doesn't radically change, you know, the approvals that council had done previously. And so this is a form of very gentle density that, you know, we've taken the lessons learned from those other things and done some tweaks to make sure that this is more palatable, but are easy to accommodate without major impacts. So essentially, council's already done a version of that, but we always bring housekeeping amendments forward so that you know, if there are minor tweaks that we have to make in the future, that we're able to do that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's important just by way of brief comment if I could, because I am interested in some tweaks, but I also don't want to do something last minute that upsets. Anyway, to my question, sorry. My first question is to do with the lot widths. What's the rationale really for having a lot width? Because there are obviously some lots that are narrower, that are very, very deep, that would be able to accommodate more density.
So through the chair, the rationale for the lot width is to recognize that we want to make sure that we maintain livability and that lots are sized appropriately to accommodate all the different functions that are necessary. So one of the biggest drivers is parking and the amount of parking that's necessary. And so while we are recommending reductions in parking across the board, we recognize that in suburban areas, especially where lots are built to those minimum lot sizes, a minimum width in order to accommodate for at least 2 cars in a driveway without undue width and not widening even further is something that it's a useful metric for residents to know right off, okay, my lot's going to work, it's not going to work. You're right, there probably are lots that are skinnier and much deeper that may work. However, we wanted to create a bylaw that was going to be broad-based enough to address most lots in most areas. And so if there are anomalies, if there are cases where it's a special case, the minor variance process remains a viable option to take a look at those in more in-depth detail.
Sorry, but more in-depth detail, but they would still have to go to committee of adjustment then if it was anything less than, it's 10.5 meters, correct?
10.5 in the suburban areas is what we're recommending.
And I noticed in the report, again, the rationale behind that was staff is not recommending increasing the percentage. I think it's 40% for driveways now. Is that correct?
50%.
Was there any analysis done as to how many more properties we brought on board if we were to increase that to 45 or 50%?
Through the chair, just to increase the driveway width?
Right.
So in the suburban areas, it's already 50%. It is 50%. Greg, do we know how many lots off the top would be added if we were to enable a lesser minimum lot width?
Go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. So we've undertaken a lot area analysis of all the lots in Kitchener. So we're adding about 11,000 lots on top of what's already permitted to enable 4 units. And that's based on the 10.5 meter lot width requirements in the suburban areas. If we reduce the lot width requirement further, and so that analysis hasn't been done, but I can quickly take a look at those numbers and get back to you if that's needed.
Yeah, that's most of the time, but that's one of those things I'm wondering, because obviously if we increase the amount you can pave in front of your house, then that would decrease the lot width required to meet that test. So that's one of those things that I don't want to push now because we don't have time, but I have more questions, Chair Singh. I'll keep back in.
Yeah, thank you. When you say, Mr. Khandelwal, you can get that information quickly, can that be gotten for this evening or would be challenging? Keep it on, sorry.
Through the chair, yes. So I can do it fairly quickly and I can get those numbers. Important to note is that it's a metric, a combination of lot area and lot width. So there's a minimum lot area requirement as well in the suburban areas, so 360 square meters, and then a lot width as well. So,
okay, I'll look to you, Councillor Davey, because staff are able to get some of this information. So if you want to prescribe kind of what lot width you were thinking of, as well as the lot area, but I'll go to Mr. Reedman. I think no, are you okay? All right, good. I'm going to turn your mic back on.
Based on, right, so, sorry, so current, remind me, so current pavable width of a driveway is what percentage?
So I think there's two questions at hand. One is how many more lots we can enable through a reduction of the lot width requirement, which is 10.5 meter as per the report, if you wanted to look at smaller lot width. And to the second question was if he allowed for wider driveway percentage, how many more units would be, or lots would be enabled as well? Just for clarification.
Yeah, that's essentially it.
Okay, all right, so staff will look at that information.
Yeah, so through the chair, one thing I can offer is that the more lot width, so 5.2 meters is the width of a double-car driveway. So that's sort of the metric that we would be looking at. We can do that calculation to determine what the lot width would be. We do recommend not increasing it further, and the reason for that is driveway widenings eat into boulevard space, which provides space in the front yards and space in the boulevard for a couple of things. For all the utilities in the street, on-street parking is condensed quite a bit as driveways and their aprons continue to widen. And in addition, it could have impacts to street trees and the ability to plant new street trees and to protect street trees if more people wish to widen their driveways to accommodate additional parking. So when the comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw was approved, there were reductions to driveway widths for those purposes, and so that was something that this council did deliberate and think about fairly recently. In no case would we recommend more than 3 parking spaces for a lot as the required amount of parking, and so that could be in a single car garage with a double car driveway in front of it. It could be possible on lots where you have a greater setback and you could have 3 in tandem, which would also be permitted.
Okay, so I will come back to Councillor Davey for his further questions, but again, this was just an opportunity for him to clarify exactly what that data that we're seeking. Mr. Reedman, you're good, or? Yeah, okay. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Chair Singh. And just a question going back to the delegates' delegation. Are we able to enforce or / insist on various methods of heating or of heating? You know, she mentioned electric and heating pumps versus natural gas. Is that something we can enforce if we want to?
Through the chair, in terms of enforcing that, these projects don't go through site plan control. The green development standard that we're looking at through the separate project would apply through Planning Act approvals. So at this point, there is no mechanism through like a building permit that we could limit that. So it'd be something that would be outside of the scope of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So some of the concerns that have been brought to my attention include the setbacks from adjacent properties, and people are concerned that, you know, there'll be taller buildings adjacent to their property overlooking their backyards, etc. I just wonder how you would respond to that concern.
So through the chair, we're not recommending any changes to minimum setbacks for the principal dwelling. Those remain exactly as they are in our current bylaw. The one area that we are recommending some minor changes to is for the additional units that are detached. Right now, up to 4.5 meter ADU is permitted, and it's required to be set back 0.6 meters. That 0.6 is consistent with detached other structures, like if it's a garage or a shed or a pool house or whatever, also 0.6 typically. Where we're recommending an increase in height, we would recommend an additional setback up to 0.9 meters to allow some additional space for maintenance as well as just a bit more separation. We don't want to be using a lot of the rear yard space, especially where yards are small, to provide for setbacks that are not super usable for property owners, but we want to respect the proximity to the neighbors as well. So 0.9 was seen as being a reasonable increase. The buildings would never be higher than 6 meters to the midpoint of the roof. So that provides a bit more space. We also heard concerns from residents about privacy and overlook, and so the building code has
I don't know what happened, if you could. Technical difficulty, keep back in. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the building code also limits openings when they're close to the property line. So when you are closer than, I believe it's 4 feet, there's really strong limitations on the amount of unprotected openings. So with respect to privacy, when buildings are very close, you're not going to have a lot of that overlook from windows and doors.
Good. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The other question that has arisen is regarding the protection of mature trees on properties less than 1 acre. Will this be discussed? Because there's a concern, right, that we have this tree canopy sort of goals and things that we want to ensure that we meet or at least grow to that. And yet we have these hard surfaces, which have already been mentioned, and that itself is problematic, but also the mature trees in existing lots.
Councillor Chapman, so there's a part of your question that I want to make sure that we are succinct to the topic at hand,
It is.
which is, I'll explain myself why I'm rebutting to what you asked regarding the 1 acre protection of 1 acre or less thereof. Right now, as the report indicates, it's 10.5 meter frontage with 350 square meter, which is significantly below that 1 acre, even half acre requirement. So if you want to be more specific to boulevard street protection or the trees that are on the lot, but more specific to the 350 square meter as opposed to the 1 acre, because that's a different discussion, probably
Well,
for
it's not
another.
different because right now we have no protection for properties that are 1 acre, less than 1 acre.
But we're not talking about for less than 1 acre, we're talking about 350 square meters, so
Okay,
that's,
then 350. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is that is there any mechanism in place to protect trees on these lots?
So through the chair, we've attempted to strike a bit of a balance between the increase in density and also requiring things like landscaped areas in the front yards, the rear yards. Part of the reason for not wanting to pursue additional driveway widenings is to protect space in the boulevards for tree plantings. There is a parallel body of work going on with respect to the trees conservation bylaw and those processes, and that could include updates, but that is outside the scope of the work that we've been doing through this project. But we do hear and recognize that there are questions and concerns. When there's neighboring trees, that's certainly something that through our next steps and through some of the communication documents with people who are proposing to build that we can share and highlight what some of those concerns might be and how projects need to respect existing vegetation on other properties.
Another question I have has to do with existing dwellings. So the idea with this proposal is that it be in addition to the existing structure. You couldn't come along, demolish what's there and build 4 units. Is that correct?
So through the chair, the regulations would enable somebody to demolish and replace it with a new build, the same way they could take down any structure right now and replace it. There would be limitations in areas, though, that were like heritage conservation districts, where there's other regulation that would have regulations layered on top of the zoning bylaw. But it would also allow for renovations, additions to structures, additional detached dwellings, but it could permit for demolition and reconstruction.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Can you tell me, is there any opportunity in here for these new dwelling units to be freehold?
So through the chair, at this time we are anticipating that these units would be generally rental units. Freehold units would require that the property either go through a severance process to create a separate lot, and we're not proposing to make substantial changes to lot size, or a condominium process that would allow unitization of the units so they could be individually sold. While I understand it's not impossible to do that, creating a condominium corporation and all the bylaws and everything for a very small type of dwelling can be very cumbersome. So we have anticipated that most of these would end up being rental units.
Okay. Can you give me the difference between what a rooming house would be in this classification if they're not have the ability to be freehold?
So through the chair, a lodging house is when there are 5 or more individual like leases and bedrooms that could be rented out. If it's a home, you could rent. So a lodging house presumes that somebody is renting a bedroom and shares a kitchen or other common amenity space within a dwelling unit. This would be a full dwelling unit, including a kitchen, a bathroom, and living space, all within the same unit. So it would be all your living functions within one space, as opposed to a lodging house where you would rent your bedroom, possibly a suite like a bedroom and a bathroom, and share a kitchen.
Okay, but we have that already with the 3 units, correct?
So yes, 3 units would be 3 individual full dwelling units, not lodging units.
Okay. I guess my other question is, what are the current side yard setbacks for subdivision, greenfield subdivision development?
Through the chair, in most cases, the bylaw is 1.2 meters as the minimum side yard setback. There's a few subdivisions that have some very specific zoning that was put in place by the subdivider that has created reciprocal easements, for example, where it can be reduced to 2 feet. And there's other examples in some older subdivisions where you may have a 0 setback on one side and 3 meters on the other, again with reciprocal easements. So that's all baked into the base zoning that would be in place in those subdivisions.
Okay. So with those subdivisions, how many units are we looking at in like I'm going to do a comparison here. If you have it, if you have that at hand.
So through the chair, I don't have a breakdown of how many units would be in the new subdivisions that have reduced side yard setbacks.
Is your question how many additional units have been created because of the reduced side yard setback as opposed to the minimum 1.2?
My question?
Was that your question?
No, my question is, I would like to know what how many, I know it's not all of the subdivisions are have those types of setbacks, but I would like to know what portion of the city has that type of setback.
So I think it was more of how many units have that reduced
And
setback.
how many units is that being created for it too as well? So I know I'm just trying to see what the comparison is, because I think it's a good metric to know, because we're for allowing short side yards in new subdivisions, and we're looking at infill. Infill should be a lot more easier to do, to have a lesser setback, not be more restrictive.
So through the chair, I think the Mattamy subdivision, I could not tell you the exact number of units. The Mattamy subdivision, for instance, is one. The Wollaston subdivision is another where I know there are reduced setbacks. It's only the newer ones in the emerging areas, I think, that have pursued those on a case-by-case basis. In those cases, if you wanted to add an additional unit, those setbacks are existing and they're legal in the zoning bylaw. So certainly in those cases, you could add additional units on those lots. However, in most cases where that has been put into place, we do have easements in place, because 2 feet is not usually enough to access a 2-story wall and to put up a ladder. So there's rights that have been added to neighboring dwellings to provide for that reduced setback. So there's special provisions that have been put in place in the subdivision agreements that allow for a reduced side yard setback.
Okay, I will be in again for second round.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I just want to share some comments that I received this morning. I think an email circulated through a neighborhood in my ward. So I'm sharing these comments. I'm not saying that I agree with them. I'm sharing them, and there may be some things that could be clarified, but just to share some of the sentiment that is out there. The ability to demolish a home and create 2 lots with a 3-story building completely ruins our street and the appeal it has. A driveway with parking in the backyard. Would love to sit poolside and have that view. If anything, new build areas could have these options as you purchase in that area, knowing the bylaws beforehand. I have large concerns about my property value decreasing, as well as the strain on our services. Another one, multi-generational families will not be the norm. They will be housing the temporary immigrants who are taking up places in our universities, colleges, and our places of employment. Stanley Park has become a place of high crime, homelessness, drug deals, and shootings, to name a few. Adding fourplex housing all over will only exacerbate the problems we have that are not being addressed. I am fearful for my kids' safety. This kind of housing should be in the downtown area where high-rises can be used to house the temporary housing crisis. Public transit and government programs are accessible downtown. It does not make sense to expand to the suburbs. Adding an influx of individuals to our area will not only devalue our property, as you will now have individuals who might not have the same pride in their homes, but even further competition for childcare, camps, large class sizes in schools, and resources for the community.
Councillor Schneider, I'm not stopping you from reading. I think, of course, this can be shared amongst the committee. The reason why I'm stopping and cautioning is the tone of the comments seems to be a little xenophobic and could be taken offense hearing in a public meeting. So I don't know the benefit derived from having to hear it publicly.
Yeah, I'll stop, but I just wanted, I'm saying I'm not necessarily
Of course, no,
agreeing with them.
I know that.
And I did respond to the citizens that contacted me, thanking them for sharing their concerns and saying I would share them. And now I have shared that with an email with council.
I appreciate that. Just as chair, hearing some of those comments, I've taken some exception, and I think it's best that we just circulate it amongst committee. Thank you.
So, in there were some things that probably were not correct. There's some misinformation. I just wondering maybe if you could speak to some of that maybe some of what you heard, and comment on it. For what you can comment on,
So, through the chair, I think as planners, we often hear that change is difficult in neighborhoods. We often hear that people are worried about something that they haven't experienced before. And what I can offer is that over the last number of years, we've already permitted 3-unit dwellings, we've permitted detached ADUs in rear yards, and we have some experiences with these and how they work and how they can fit into neighborhoods and how they provide additional housing options. And from people who, comments that have been provided to the report, where people have experienced these changes, they like having new neighbors. They feel that this provides an option for housing in our neighborhoods. And as planners, we feel the same way, that providing additional housing options and choice in all areas of our city, whether it's in established residential neighborhoods, in the downtown, in new suburban areas, provides choice and option to residents to live in different ways. It provides affordable types of units, whether it's for unrelated renters or extended family members. And so, while I think change can be scary sometimes, and I think it's something that's really important for this community to move forward with and to enable in our neighborhoods.
Okay. Just quickly, I know one of the comments was a 3-story structure. I don't believe that's possible with this.
So through the chair, in some areas up to 3 stories could be permitted. 11 meters is our maximum height, so that could be 2 stories with a peaked roof. It could be, we've seen some examples where it could be 3 stories fit into 11 meters. In some areas, for instance, in our central neighborhoods, if it's primarily lower dwellings that are less than 6 meters, you couldn't go higher than 9 meters. So it depends a little bit on the existing zoning framework.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, and thanks for this in the report. I think this is a good idea. It's another tool in the toolbox, as we've been saying all along. This is our journey on this council, is to try to help and not solve the housing crisis, but certainly help alleviate some of the struggles that people are facing. I have a question with regards to the trees in backyards. in particular. So I'm just going to give you a scenario. So, a homeowner has a backyard and a huge, 100-year-old oak tree, and the neighbor is going to build a smaller unit. That impacts the roots of that tree. What does staff do to, is there anything you can mitigate to ensure that neighboring homes won't, their landscaping and their, ancient trees won't be affected?
So impacts to neighboring trees are a matter of common law. It's not typically something that this planners would get involved in when there's not another planning mechanism like a consent application or site plan control. So it's a responsibility of the property owner to make sure that they're not damaging a tree that's on somebody else's property.
So I'm just going to interrupt here because that's where I have the problem with this. Then we bring in these ideas, and I think they're fine ideas, and we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing. And you just said that change is difficult for people. Change is hard for people that are, their neighbors are turning into 3 homes on their lot. Okay, that's fine, but there's no mechanism that can protect those lots and those trees of those neighboring lots. That's just like fend for yourself. And this is where I really struggle with this. So I get that we're doing all these things, but we've got to do something to help the adjacent property owners should they need the support. And I'm asking this because I'm dealing with a constituent in my ward that's going through this very problem, and they're not getting any help with that. I have nothing against these new homes. I've seen some really great work done on some of these added units and homes. It's wonderful, but we have to find a way to balance this, I think.
So through the chair, we did speak previously in a response to another question about the parallel work that's going on with our tree conservation bylaw. And that, I don't know, Garang, if you have anything further that you could offer. I know you've been involved in that project more specifically.
I got too many mics open. Let's start. Go ahead.
Through the chair, so we understand provision of additional dwelling units, particularly detached dwellings, may impact trees shared between neighbors and or trees on adjacent properties. So when development impacts, and as Katie mentioned, shared boundary trees or those on adjacent private properties, it is a civil matter and the city does not get involved in it. Through the Tree Conservation Processes Review project, that's a parallel body that we're currently undertaking. We're looking into how we can address these concerns in different ways. And one of the ways that we've highlighted in our conversations is letting property owners know upfront at the time of the building permit application that this can be an issue, so that they're aware of any civil litigation matters that may arise at a later point. We're also looking at other process improvements that may come forth and that may include revisions to the private tree bylaw or public tree bylaws that would help address these concerns.
Thank you for that. I just wish that we'd do things in tandem here. I mean, it's like the cart before the horse as far as this goes. And to say that, we're putting this through, but, if this doesn't work for you, you can hire yourself a lawyer, and there's nothing we can do to help you. And we're creating, essentially, the city's creating this problem for neighboring. So it isn't any wonder that some of the residents are frustrated. I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to stop you earlier for making the comment because I'm guilty of it so often. I felt a little... But anyways, Mr. Weidman, do you want to add some clarification?
Through the chair, and so we have allowed this already for over 2 years on 50% of our properties, and we've seen significant amounts of development over the last couple of years, and we've also seen an increase in our tree canopy as well. And so, I don't think we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we're approving something that's sort of a minor amendment to a program that's already in place, while we're implementing another strategy that's looking to increase our tree canopy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That adds some facts to fear. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and through you. I'm wondering, going back to some of the comments that Councillor Schneider had read to us from his resident, I think that, as you were saying, change is hard. I know that you have a few representative pictures of what these units can look like. I know that MP Sean Fraser sent out some pictures this weekend of examples and of what these can look like as well, of ones that were older, et cetera. So I'm wondering if maybe there will be an opportunity for when we're doing more communication around this to maybe put some more examples in there of how different ones look, how older ones look, and how they fit into the streetscape in the neighborhood. And I think that that would be useful for people. Is that something that you can, maybe you have more examples and I just haven't seen them?
So through the chair, that's certainly something that we can incorporate into our communication materials and our next steps, types of communication to help demonstrate what units could look like in different forms, and yeah, happy to do that.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Mayor Vavenwick.
Thanks very much, and thanks to staff for all the work. Just a question, because I think it's also important to put in all of this in perspective in terms of, you know, the kinds of volumes we saw. And, you know, I was around when we had the debate about going to 2 per property, and it was very contentious. And then the province did it, and the contention, you know, very quickly kind of went away. Because it wasn't, people realized it wasn't a hugely problematic experience. But more recently, we have the example of having gone to 3 as of right across the province, including in our own community. And that, I think, last year, if I remember, was it somewhere in the 20s, around the number of building permits that were requested. And I raise this because I think it's important to just touch on what our experience has been. And, you know, while we obviously hope that this will be another tool in the toolbox that'll help us take some steps, I also don't anticipate that we're going to have 20,000 building permits tomorrow to start, you know, fundamentally, it's going to change things in a dramatic way. So I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about that.
Certainly, through the chair. So we did pull some information about building permits that have been issued over the last number of years for triplexes going back to 2019 and backyard homes going back to 2020. Duplexing has been incrementally increasing as well. So in 2019 for duplexes we had 212, 2020 we had 286, 2021 383, 2022 547, and 2023 688, and those trends are continuing in the last couple months of this year. We, subsequent to the report, we've been able to pull a little bit more data. So duplexing is great and strong. Triplexing, we've seen a very a slower uptake for sure. In 2019 we had 6 units. In 2021 we had, in 2022 we had 10 units each of those years. In 2023, the increase was up to 29, and year to date in 2024, we've had 6. So the numbers of triplexes have been fairly increasing, but fairly low. And similar numbers with the detached ADUs. The first year, they've only been in place for 3 years. So the first year we had 5 building permits, the second year 15, last year 27, and this year so far we've had 5. So we would expect that trend to continue with the 4 units as well. That the change will likely be gradual, probably, you know, slower the first year or 2 as people figure out this type and the style of dwellings that work and are financially viable, and then ramping up over time. And we expect sort of the trends for the triplexes and the detached ADUs to also sort of probably continue now that we've are recommending regulations that will allow triplexes on more lots than they currently are today, and the same with ADUs. But also, just I don't expect it'll be a huge impact right away.
Because even when you're talking about the duplexing, judging by those numbers, I mean, we haven't seen, like, it's been essentially less than 1% of the residential dwellings in the city that have applied in any given year.
Yeah, through the chair, definitely less than 1% in any given year. I would say overall we have about 10% of our residential lots that have more than 1 dwelling unit, whether that's a duplex, triplex, or more.
Okay, great. That's very helpful information, I think, for us to consider. Thank you.
Okay, so we have repeat, we have Councillor Davey, Chapman, Ioannidis, and Councillor Deneau, and then Councillor Schneider. Councillor Davey, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, thank you. So just going to follow up on one last question with the lot widths. There are a number of lots in the city that are on circles or cul-de-sacs where the entry is very narrow, sometimes much less than the requirement, but there is double parking once you get up in the lot. Would they have to go through committee of adjustment, or would staff have the freedom to be able to look at that and realize it's an exception?
So through the chair, minimum lot widths are usually measured at the 6-meter setback, so it wouldn't be measured right where the street is. So depending on how big the pie is, it could be significantly wider than what their actual frontage is at the street. So if they still didn't meet the requirement of 10.5, then it would require a minor variance if that measurement at the 6-meter setback.
Perfect. So beginning of property line and then go back. Okay, that actually gives me some comfort. Thank you. The next question I had was the additional setback in going from 4.5 meters to 6 meters. In places where it's constrained, again, I'm not sure if this would have to go to committee of adjustment, but if the property owner agreed to not have any openings at all or windows on the side, would they be able to build back to the point? Sorry, it's 0.6, right, for endpoints 9? Is there a way that we could make it possible for them, if we tied it to no windows, no openings, so no privacy issues, to go back to the 0.6?
So through the chair, whether it's at 0.6 or 0.9, I believe it would be the same. I'm going to look to building staff. Tim's nodding. They would still have the same restrictions for the amount of openings. The 0.9 meters is tied more to being able to maintain higher portions of the building without encroaching on. So if the neighbor has a fence, getting a ladder up in 2 feet of space is really difficult. That extra foot allows you to lean it up to maintain your eaves, to get up onto your roof, that sort of thing. So that amount of space is more of a maintenance issue to physically get in between.
Okay, thank you. And last question. So if you're building a separate unit in your backyard, there has to be a 5-meter setback from the existing building, correct? How does it work then if again, I'm thinking about, larger lots or corner pie-shaped lots. If the home is diagonal, how does the setback work from the diagonal?
So through the chair, it would be 5 meters back from any given point. So if the building was sort of step back, it would be 5 meters from that point. If it was on the diagonal, it would be measured along the diagonal.
Okay, so that would be, wow, so that would be larger than 5 meters then, if it's perfectly diagonal, correct?
I guess if it was set at the angle as well, then it would be 5 meters, but otherwise you would have a point that could be closer and a point that would be farther away. Arwa, did you have any thoughts on that from the layout perspective?
Through the chair, so if the buildings are facing each other, then that's when we apply that 5-meter separation. But then if the buildings are not facing each other, then that won't be applicable. Yeah, if that answers the question.
That's actually helpful. Those are all my questions. I'm not sure if anyone's moved it, but at the appropriate time I moved it, and I have an amendment that I sent to the clerk as well.
Thank you very much. So we just have repeat of questions. I forgot, I wanted to ask mine before I go to those that are coming around the second time. Again, I think the questions that have been asked, have been enlightening to pinpoint if we are enabling enough. The report outlined that from an outside consultant that ADUs generate low to small profit as an incentivization. Right now we have as a right triplexing also. Is it as a right triplexing on the existing, like within the existing premises, or is it 2 plus the ADU?
So through the chair, the existing regulations would permit 3 in the principal dwelling, or it could permit 2 in the principal dwelling and 1 in a detached structure. So 3 in total on the lot.
Okay, so the current as a right for fourplexing puts a limit or a minimum of 10.5 lot width. The reason why I'm asking is we want to make sure as we make it easier for fourplexes, we should be retroactively looking at a duplex and triplex. So within the triplex, what is the minimum lot width?
So through the chair, today it's 13.1. It would also be eligible for exactly the same regulation, so 10.5 for the suburban areas and whatever the zone requirement is in the central city.
So that's really the reason why I asked, because that's how I recall it, that it was fairly high. I was giving ourselves a bit of a credit, thinking that was 12.5, but the fact is 13.5. It's even a little bit more egregious of trying to figure out how, finding enough lots that would accommodate within that. This is presumptive, but I still would like to hear staff's comment on it. The fact that we've had a very small uptake on the triplexing compared to duplexing, the fact it's only been, I think, last year were 29 compared to duplexes, which were 688. Is that also contribute to the fact that the minimum lot width requirement was 13.5 meters?
So through the chair, I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning is. The triplexing and detached ADUs definitely requires a significantly larger lot width, whereas duplexing is permitted on any lot subject to the zoning regulations, so under our current regulations. So the proposed regulations would also apply to triplexes and any of the ADUs in addition to the fourplexes. So the lot sizes would decrease for all the different dwelling types to the zone minimum. So that's the one caveat I'll put in place. If you're in like a Res 1 zone or on a corner lot where the minimum in the zoning bylaw is slightly larger, then you would defer to that regulation.
Okay. I say this with a caveat. There's no exact science. And there's nothing wrong with getting it wrong as we're trying to figure this out. The fact that initially it was our recommendation and this council's approval, the end decision lies in council, not on staff recommendation, that we made for triplexing 13.5. And again, we don't know all the reasons, but that could be a contributing factor why there was a very small uptake. So why did staff come forward with a 10.5 when triplexing is 13.5? Why didn't we set for fourplex 13.5 as well if that was a sound recommendation or sound basis of allowing extra units?
So through the chair, when the ADUs were put in place, that 13.1 lot width regulation was established. And I think that was an analysis of the team at the time who put in place those zoning requirements. When we moved forward with the omnibus report, you'll remember that one from 2023, which enacted the provincial rules, we adopted those same regulations that were put in place for the detached ADUs. And so now, over the course of the last couple of years with the ADUs, as well as our experience with triplexes, we agree. We think the lot should be somewhat smaller, and we have good justification for doing that. And so that's why we're recommending in the central city and in the near our LRT stations where we don't have as high a demand for parking, that those be just whatever the lot minimum is in the zone, which maintains that zoning in a neighborhood. And then in suburban areas is where it's proposed to be 10.5 as the minimum, whether you have 3 units, 4 units, or a detached ADU.
Okay, so I appreciate that we can acknowledge that we perhaps didn't get it perfect. So knowing that we didn't, could this be an opportunity for us to rectify on the threeplex and be more transformational as we do the fourplex and allow triplexing, same as duplex, as a right on the minimum lot width? Typically it's 9 meter.
So through the chair, I think as staff, we would give consideration to an incremental approach, and it's certainly something that we can monitor over the coming year or 18 months or 2 years to see what the uptake is and to see if there's variances people are requesting smaller lot widths with creative designs that are working, and I think that's certainly something to give consideration to. I think having had some time to analyze, to look at variances, to explore what that means has really been beneficial because it gives us confidence in our recommendations that we've made to this council.
Okay, I have a lot more questions, but I'll keep myself back in as well. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. You said that the green development standards are not applicable here because it's not a new build?
Through the chair, that is correct. It's because the Planning Act requires, or it's, green development standards are applied through the Planning Act, and for 4 units or less, and in fact 10 units or less, site plan control no longer applies because of the changes in provincial legislation through Bill 23. So we cannot apply a site plan to this type of project.
Okay. The other question I had, so I believe staff is working on a rental replacement bylaw and an eviction bylaw. These are all the rentals, right? They're not condominiums. How would these regulations, if they were to come to us and be passed, how would they interconnect with the fourplexes?
Apologies. Ms. Bustamante, go ahead.
So through the chair to Councillor Chapman, so staff is currently working on a rental replacement bylaw that we are targeting bringing forward this spring to council for consideration. And that rental replacement bylaw is applicable to projects where 6 or more units are set to be demolished. So in this case, we're talking about configurations that would have 4 units, 3 or 4 units, and so it would not be subject to the rental replacement bylaw that we'd be bringing forward.
Even though they're rentals, eh? Okay. I had a question about the duplexes. Are most of them severed properties or private ownership versus rentals?
So through the chair, I don't know that we have statistics on how many duplexes. I presume you're talking about ones where a property owner owns and rents both units in a dwelling that has a duplex?
Well, I'm thinking more of a demolition where they come in and they build 2 houses. They build a semi, I guess.
So for a semi-detached house, it's designed, so it would be 1 unit on each side of a common wall split this way, and then each side could be sold if it's severed. So in many cases, we do get applications for a semi and it's severed once it's built, and then each side can be sold. Any additional units in the semi, the one half of the semi, would likely be rentals because you can't sell just part of the building. If it was a duplex, the 1 unit, the second unit in it, so it could be owner occupied where the owner lives on property and rents out 1 unit.
Okay, so we're talking duplexes, not semis, I guess. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that clarification. We have no tools that would allow for some sort of green development standards for any of this.
Through the chair, what I would suggest is that council may consider advocating with the province in terms of authority to apply green development standards through the building code, because we don't have the authority right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wiedemann, do you want to add?
Yeah, through the chair. And so I know the province is considering harmonizing the building code with the federal building code, and so the federal building code is a lot more progressive in terms of green building standards, and so there could be advocacy by council to ensure that that's adopted quickly to ensure that any building is built to a certain standard.
Okay, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I guess one of the questions I would like clarification on, and I know Katie, you had mentioned the boulevard portion, and are they all going to be set back as 6 meters, or is it less in the central neighborhoods?
So through the chair, I'm sorry, the parking space setback 6 meters, or what, the garage?
Yes. Yes.
So our current regulations require that your first parking space must be set back 6 meters from the street. What we are recommending is that any parking space located within a garage should be set back 6 meters, but that you could legally count your parking space or parking spaces that are between the building and the street, provided there's a 0.5 meter setback. So parking stall is 5.5 meters long, plus a 0.5 meter setback is 6 meters. So we're recommending that any parking space in a driveway, at least one of them should be 5.5 meters plus a 0.5 meter setback to that parking space. Is that what your question was? I'm sorry if I missed that.
Okay. No, well, my question is, I was just wondering how increasing a driveway width from like whatever it is, 50% to 55%, how does that affect the boulevard portion? Sorry, I should have asked maybe that way.
Okay, sorry, so through the
Mr.
chair.
Reedman, perhaps you want to?
Yeah, through the chair, and staff can jump in after me, but we know there's areas of the city that have had very tight boulevard space, and we have ongoing issues with snow maintenance, trees, on-street parking in those areas, and so we're just trying to mitigate that through making sure that we apply zoning rules that don't create that more broadly across the city.
Just as a clarity, though, I think because Councillor Ioannidis has raised this and others have too, there are municipalities that allow for, I don't know what it is in meters, but I think it's 8 meters, so 27 feet, lot frontage. How do they enable it? Have we looked at other, as peer municipalities?
Through the chair, and so I can't speak to that. I would ask the staff team to talk to that. We just want to make sure that we are managing sort of the overall risk and making sure that we're not creating rules that become unmanageable from an operations perspective and a council complaint perspective. We very much want to enable housing across the city, but we want to make sure that we do it in a measured way, that make sure that we balance all of the needs of our community.
Okay, all right. Just I wanted to make sure for clarity that we have looked at peer municipalities. But Katie, do you want to add further?
So through the chair, I think that Mr. Reedman sort of described it well. We certainly did look at some peer municipalities. Goreng, do you have those statistics, or can you speak to the comparable size lot widths in different municipalities that we looked at?
Through the chair, so we looked at 6 municipalities through our municipal scan. So City of Toronto, Mississauga, London, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Portland, Oregon. The lot sizes, when there's 4 units permitted, so lot width is in the ballpark figure of about 10 meters, and that's basically relying on the underlying zoning in those cities. So it's context specific for those cities. If in terms of the question earlier about the driveway width, our driveway width is 50%, but it's also maxed out at 8 meters. So in relation to looking at other municipalities, 8 meters driveway width is also there.
Okay. Councillor Ioannidis.
Okay. I don't think I'm being clear on what I'm asking, but I guess what I'm seeing throughout the city, I see driveways much bigger than what they're supposed to be, and either they're not being enforced or they've been applying for variances, and more likely, I doubt that's happening. So I see it more and more every day. I see it almost tons of it on my street. So I'm just not understanding, if we see the community reacting that way, why aren't we following suit with the community?
So through the chair, there certainly were lots of historic examples of subdivisions that were built when our driveway regulations were not as tight. They permitted 70–80% width of lots of driveways, and the streetscape that's resulted in is primarily hardscape, no room for infiltration, for vegetation, for trees, for sidewalk connections. You don't have front doors fronting the street. Typically, those driveways would lead to a double-car garage. That is most of the facade. And so the response that the city took to some of those negative implications for streetscape, for the roadway, was to further limit driveway widths. And so you're right, there are areas in the city where driveways are wider than 50% of the lot width because they're a historical situation. And it's something that was a negative in the community, something that, caused problems because there's very limited on-street parking, limited space to store snow when people shovel those really wide driveways. And so it did cause quite a lot of problems. It does provide a lot of parking on driveways, but it's not necessarily a streetscape that people find livable and something that's that as staff we would recommend.
Okay, I see my time's out again, but I will hear what Councillor Davey has to say, but in light, if he doesn't move this, I would like to see, like we did with Growing Together and inclusionary zoning, a one-year follow-up review to see how this is being adopted.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And just for clarification to staff, again, my apologies, I got that wrong. I think I was basing on the minimum lot width of any single detached, looking at, peer municipalities like Toronto. But I'm glad that we looked at the 4 units as a comparable. So thank you for that extra information. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I just wanted to maybe get staff's opinion on the comments from the Premier who did not want to do this province-wide, but the Housing Minister said has no problems with municipalities pursuing it. Do we have any concerns about this being possibly overturned? Or
Mr. Reedman, do you want to let me add to that?
Yes, through the chair. And so we understand that to be that the province is not enacting that province-wide, and it's up to local municipalities to choose to do that. The approach that we're taking is that we're not recommending 4 stories as of right, which is one of the concerns that was raised through some of those discussions. We're looking at a way to incorporate 4 units through the existing built form in the neighborhoods, and so we're looking at, we've coined it missing little instead of missing middle, to really fit within the neighborhoods as well.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I just wanted to maybe question a little further on is kind of building on what Councillor Ioannidis brought up about the possibilities of freehold units or condominium units, because I hear a lot of comments about, hey, my kids will never be able to buy their first home. And I know this helps with rental, but I really feel strongly that people want to own their property. They want to own something. Is there any way we can make this easier for the freehold or condominium possibilities?
Through the chair, and so we're not restricting the ability to do that. I know in some cities where property values are much higher, there are 4 units that are built through a condominium structure, and so my partner was working in Ottawa for a few years, and there was a lot of those examples in the neighborhood that we lived in Ottawa. We actually owned a freehold unit within a condominium corporation. You do pay shared amenity fees like snow clearing and maintenance and things like that. So we're not restricting that, but what we are doing is enabling the 4 units to happen.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, that seems to be all the questions, so we'll open it up. It's been moved by Councillor Davey, so we'll open it up to comments, but as people are keying in for comments, let's go in my second round of questions. I'll just piggyback on what Councillor Schneider has said. The benefit of uplifting residents for ownership as opposed to only having access to tenancy in this missing little range. The hurdle of condominiumizing smaller units is generally the cost and the nature of setting it up. Have we looked at possibly setting up a general framework of condominiumizing that lesser 4 units or less to enable more of this?
So through the chair, condominiums are highly regulated under their own act, and there's very specific regulations that are in place for boards, for maintenance funds, for that sort of thing. I'm not a condo expert. We do have some examples of very small. We have at least one that's a 3-unit condominium. I think the next one I know of is maybe 7 units. My understanding from those is that they are fairly it's not impossible, just like Mr. Reedman had indicated, and it might be a route that some people wish to pursue. Certainly they would be advised to talk to get their own advice from a condominium lawyer before making applications and that sort of thing.
I'm not trying to cut you off. What was clarification was, is there space for the cities to help ease that process for the smaller units, or create a framework that's more of a ready-made model that they, investors or developers can take up on?
Through the chair, I think that what we can do is just take a look at, through the resources and tools that we want to explore for the implementation side, we can look at communication strategies so that when people are thinking, okay, well, how do I want the ownership model to work, and maybe we can give some information that way in order to help them give some consideration to what their options are.
Okay. Now, I see Councillor Davey is putting forward his amendment to have a one-year review, which I think is advisable course. 2 years is too long. What kind of metric would we be looking at? I'll share my opinion that seeing the uptake on the three plexes clearly shows that's not a significant growth. What kind of numbers do we really need to be seeing, looking at past reflection on the triplexing and the ADUs, for us to feel like, yes, we got it right, or no, perhaps amendments are required?
That's an interesting question. And like we expressed previously, I think over the first year, as people figure it out, I would expect the numbers to be lower than they will be in following years. Having said that, I think it'll be as important to maintain conversations with people who are doing the conversions to understand pinch points, things that are causing them concern with this, in as much as the number of building permits, tracking variance requests, and even just inquiries that come in, and areas where people are proposing things where they maybe don't fit. So I think that might be as important, especially in a one-year time frame, because as you can see, or as we saw with the triplexing and the ADUs in their first year, it was in the single digits, 5, 6, right? I'd also caution that we're just approaching the construction season for this year, so hopefully we will have some uptake now in the summer. But it could be that, some of that construction people get through their planning stages and start thinking about land acquisition and that sort of thing, which also takes time. And that probably the second year is when we'll begin to see increased numbers as well.
No, I appreciate that. It's just that we don't have the luxury of time.
No, I understand.
Because of the crunch.
Sorry, through the chair, if I could just add, I think, with the ADUs that we allowed as of right in 2021, we did agree to come back a year later and report back on the success of that after the first year. We met with those who had built them and constructed them. We conducted site visits, and as Katie has mentioned, we looked at the pain points in that process to help refine the process moving forward for the second and third year of the ADU implementation. And I think we would take a similar approach with the 4 units as of right. I think the one thing we did hear from our industry consultation is that the margin is a lot better for those interested in this type of development for 4 units than 3 units. And so while I can't speak for the team, I think a metric of success for me would be if we saw greater uptake in year 1 for the 4 units than we did for the 3 units and for the subsequent years thereafter. So looking at ADUs, we had 5, 15, and then 27 for our first 3 years. If we have more than that with 4 units as of right, then to me that would be successful.
Okay, no, that puts a certain target in mind. I appreciate that. I have 23 seconds left, so I'll be very quick. So with that, we have the official plan amendment that we're looking at as well. Could we look at clarifying or making it easy potentially on the various other questions asked regarding setback, lot width for triplexing instead of the 10.5, perhaps what the zoning minimum may be for that particular zoning for low-rise? Is that an opportunity in that 1-year mark to capture it within the official plan amendment? Oh, sorry.
So through the chair, our official plan doesn't look at details like lot widths, but as you do know, we did launch our official plan last month, and we will be conducting a series of different initiatives and looking at different types of housing forms throughout the city, and certainly anything that we learn along the way as we do our official plan review work, we're happy to bring back and report to council on.
Okay, all right. I was hoping that we can capture that. If the committee will allow a little bit of latitude, I know I'm going over my 5 minutes, but this will be the last question. Regarding the ADUs, because this is part of the component, trying to see if you can fit in or the additional dwelling units requirement. Have you looked at the pro forma of, looking at how these things are built and how they're financed? Because the comments I've received from the industry is the fact that it's very prohibitive on financing. Banks are not willing to lend money on the additional dwelling units. It's primarily either if there's equity available from the existing unit or additional infusion of capital to be able to build it. but banks are not willing to increase the mortgage to enable construction of the additional dwelling unit. Have staff incurred or been responsive to that type of comments?
So through the chair, the scope of the work did not include an in-depth look at how ADUs were financed, how they are brought on board in terms of, the costs associated with it. As a next step, I think what we would hope to do is outline probably what costs could be expected. However, we were focused on the regulations, on creating the regulatory framework that will enable it and enable the detached ADUs.
Okay, I'll open it up for comments. Oh, do you, Rosa, want to add?
Yeah, through the chair, if I may just add some additional comments to that. I had the benefit of attending the National Housing Conference last week, and there's some very interesting things happening with modular housing and with automation. And I was made aware of a company that's exploring basically a robot that could frame an additional detached unit in a backyard in approximately 1 week and dramatically save on the cost of manual labor by using automation and robotics. So I think as we see this area continue to expand and the investment in research and development in this area expand, that may bring down things like some of the labor costs that would have historically been associated with detached additional dwelling units.
Okay. I'll open it up for comments. Go ahead, Councillor Stretch.
Thanks. I just had a question around land ownership and a landowner deciding to make their space or additional units a co-op. Do we know how easy, does that fall under condo regulations, or is that something totally different? And is that something we could resource people on?
Sorry. Through the chair, we're not experts at condo, but we can at cooperative housing and sort of that structure, but we can certainly look into it, and in terms of some of the messaging or communication around ownership options, we can do a little bit of research and see if we can point people in the right direction in terms of what they're considering that way.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Johnston, you have a question or comment?
I have a question as well, Councillor Singh, and actually it was along the same line as what Councillor Stretch just asked as well, was around the opportunity for people to go in together and do this as a co-op. I think that's a great way of pooling your resources and being able to afford something. Is this something then that if it's not something that we can be dealing with, is it something we should be working on as a motion, and it needs to go to the province or to the feds or something to look at how we can arrange financing for this? If you can't answer that, that's okay. You can maybe send us an email or something, but
through the chair, and so there is provincial legislation around forming cooperatives, and so that would be the approach that people could take. I don't believe there's anything restricting individuals on a property to create a cooperative, but they would have to follow the provincial application process.
okay, so that's already in place then. Maybe that's something that we can provide information about on our website around this would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I just add on to that, Councillor Johnston. Again, at the National Housing Conference, there was some information about community land trusts and about groups of people that are going together to acquire land and to look at the form of housing that they could achieve together by pooling their resources. So I'm happy to reach back out to some of my contacts and see if I can find additional information to share with Council following tonight's meeting.
Councillor Davey, comment or go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I move the recommendation along with this amendment as well. It's a relatively minor amendment. I kind of look at it as giving us that second chance we didn't have with, we typically do with council. So I'm just hoping staff takes some of the comments that we noted here and sort of is prepared to address those in the fall of 2025, depending on how the numbers come back. I do think that an excellent amount of work has been done. I can tell that the community has been listened to with respect to this, and I'm very much supportive. I do want to say, though, as well, like, there's a whole bunch of parts of this that I think shouldn't have been addressed in this that need to be addressed, and I think it's really important that one of us brings forward an advocacy motion to council in the coming weeks addressing some of the issues that we talked about, because the reality is, like, our frontline staff know this better than anyone. There's a lot of people that come to us that they know what they want ADU in their backyard. They have absolutely no idea how to go about doing it, right? So when you start talking about things like condominiumizing, it's hugely daunting, and they just walk away. So I think it's really important that we do some work to try and make it turnkey to do these sorts of things going forward. And as well, in terms of that advocacy, I actually had the same thing Chair saying with the mortgage applicability. We need some advocacy on that front as well, because if people are expected to come up with cash to pay for these because they can't get the financing, well, guess what? It's not going to happen except for the top-end developer community. So I'm happy to support this, proud of the work the staff's done, but I think that advocacy piece has to come in the near future.
Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I will support the amendment and I will support the recommendation, but I'll be supporting it just out of principle, because I do feel it's a step forward. But quite frankly, I'm not really happy with the proportion of not being able to be freehold. I feel like we are creating a social inequality with regards to this process, and my fear is it's just going to be more or less an investment type of tool rather than having kids and that are able to, you know, buy a portion of one property, and they all don't want to own a compound. And so I'm happy to see that we are moving forward with this, and but I feel like we haven't done enough again, and I'm happy to see that we're going to be looking at this, because my whole intention was to see this as to be able to be freehold, and I feel we're falling short again. And I thought I made myself pretty clear with that intention, and obviously it didn't seem to resonate. So anyways, I will definitely be supporting this, but I'm going to be really looking forward to this update.
Mayor Ivanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Singh, and want to begin by again thanking staff for all of the work that they've done on this, and those in the community who have participated in the process over the last couple of months since Council originally indicated that we were looking to go in this direction. And this really amounts between last Monday and now at three significant pieces of public policy that each of which have the opportunity to make a difference in terms of housing supply, housing affordability, housing accessibility in our community. You know, I think based on the questions and the dialogue today, I think we all recognize that this, and in fact everything that we've been doing, continues to be a work in progress that is allowing for additional tools to be put into the toolbox to tackle this, some of which are in our scope of responsibility, some of which other orders of government, be it regional, provincial, or federal, need to deal with. And especially when it comes to the funding piece, which you know, is not our primary responsibility, yet as a community we have you know, found ways and continue to find ways to play a role and be part of the solution, because you know, the challenges that we're facing today are challenges that have developed over many decades, and challenges that are going to take an all-of-community solution in order to overcome that. I think the past uptake demonstrates that you know, we do need to monitor this, and I'll be pleased to support Councillor Davies' amendment in that regard, so that we're looking at this and you know, learning from our experience and making adjustments But I also believe it's the right thing to do because, as we do these kinds of things, taking incremental steps is important, both because it's difficult to reverse some things once you implement them, number one, and number two, we need to recognize while there are many people who support this work, there are some who continue to have reservations, and we need to find that right balance that will continue to hopefully bring them along in that process. I can tell you, having been around when the duplexing debate was argued, you thought at that time, and I understand where people were coming from because their home is, for many people, their largest investment. You thought that the world was going to come to an end based on some of it, and so that's why sometimes we have to learn to walk before we can run on some of these things, and I think that is the prudent choice with regular check back. So I'll be pleased to support that. I think it's important to finally remember that this is another piece in a broad body of work around Housing for All that we will continue to bring forward. And I went a few seconds over, so thank you for your patience, Mr. Chair.
All good under planning. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and I also want to thank staff for the work on this and all the citizens who provided engagement and who have provided comment. I know we have to do our part to meet our pledge, our housing pledge. I think this is a good start. I hope we don't end here. I really feel strongly that we have to find ways for people to be able to own their home, own their housing. I hope through the studies, through our ongoing work on this, that somehow we can make that happen easier. I hope this could happen in new neighborhoods and new builds where we can make the most of a single lot. So I will be supporting the amendment and the overall motion.
All right, just make some of my own comments. As others have said, that this is a step forward, and I agree with you. And thank you, staff, for undertaking this body of work, especially in the shortness of the time from when the direction was given from council to enable us to be looking at recommendations. But I have to say, and I have to be honest with myself and have to be honest with staff, I wasn't looking for a step forward. I was looking for a leap forward. And maybe that's where we missed the mark a little bit. And I think it's easy for us to see, and that's why I highlighted the uptake on the ADUs and the triplexing to show that it's not enough to try to improve, but we have to take it further beyond the consultation, figure out the pro forma. At the end of the day, a lot of these investments come with people taking risk, enabling people to see exactly how they can leverage on their investment to create it. It's not necessarily just a resident looking to add another unit. That's not enough incentive, and that's not where the uptake will be. And the fact that we had 13.5 meter a lot with requirement, I think, does directly show an indication where the bottleneck was for us to see the full benefit. And we championed that as a right triplex. We thought, we did a great change, enabling more of that diverse, different type of housing stock built at the lowest cost form at low rise, as opposed to seeing a lot of the extra density coming in the mid-rise and the high-rise. So looking at this, and I'll directly look at Ms. Bustamante, one thing that I had asked when this recommendation or direction, was given, was asking for more paradigm shift as to how we have our zoning bylaws related along with the fourplex. And at that point, staff acknowledged, sure, we will look at it, and that was regarding the height, some flexibility of pitch roof, and that was regarding the lot width as well. And I'm a little bit saddened that that's not necessarily something that even will be looked at through the bylaw amendment. If not that either, then when? The fact remains, as what Councillor Schneider and Councillor Ioannidis have continually articulated and stressed upon, it's great to have the extra units for rental. We need that. We have to be supportive. But it's another way we enable for home ownership at the lowest cost form. That allows uplifting of many families where they're able to create equity. It's not enough just to provide housing as a right, but we also have to enable and make ease towards that path of ownership. And that can be done in creative designs. That can be done looking differently than what we do it. There are other municipalities that do it and perhaps do it better, where the requirements are not as stringent as ours. And then going back to the point I made regarding the triplexing, 13.5 didn't work. So we have to be conscientious of looking at our past policies and do have that reflection. I'm glad that Councillor Davey has put forward that 1 year. I hear you. Sometimes 1 year is not enough to really capture it. But I think that 1 year is enough to enable continuation of a conversation. Conversation shouldn't just end as part of when we're looking at a policy, we intake a lot of feedback and then done. No, the conversation can carry forward. A lot of the voices that were engaged, the industry that was sought for feedback, we can continue saying, hey, let's carry on and tell us exactly what works and what doesn't. And that's what can inform us in that year mark to make better on what we're putting forward. So I congratulate staff on making that step forward in creating more housing with your recommendation. I'm glad that members of council or committee will be supportive. I will be too. But in my last remaining seconds, I want to ask again, let's take that leap forward and that 1 year mark with some of the other recommendations that may be bettering of what we are passing today. With that, it's been moved by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Okay.
Are we voting on the amendment?
Do you want to take it together or? Okay, all right. On the amendment first.
On the amendment first?
Yeah. I have to.
Through the chair, if Councillor O'Dooney and Councillor Ioannidis can vote verbally now prior to showing the vote.
All right, yes.
Yes. In favor.
Sorry, I was looking for the thumbs up. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And the main motion, recorded vote. And Councillor Ioannidis and O'Dooney, you can give thumbs up or?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, both Ioannidis and O'Dooney are in favor. And that passes unanimously too. Thank you. Once more, congratulations staff for the work that you've done, and thank you for the committee. This was great. And we have a information item, or so Kitchener, or sorry, this is part of a discussion item as well. 6.1, Kitchener Growth Management Annual Monitoring. And Gaurang Kandwal, Mr. Kandwal, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Do we have the presentation? Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Gaurang Khandelwal, and I'm a policy planner with the city. I'm here to present Kitchener's Growth Management Monitoring Report for 2023. This report measures progress against density and intensification targets, including tracking progress towards the municipal housing target, and tracks the developable land supply as well. Kitchener's housing pledge of 35,000 new housing units by 2031 was approved by Council in March of 2023. In 2022, Council approved 8,271 housing units, and in 2023, Council approved 12,227 units. Between March and December of 2023, 11,457 new housing units have been approved by Council. Kitchener's annual housing starts target under the Building Faster Fund was 2,567 for 2023. The province evaluates the housing target based on new housing and additional residential unit starts as provided by CMHC and the new beds in long-term care homes as provided by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. In 2023, Kitchener exceeded the provincially assigned 2023 housing target by 39%. Staff would like to acknowledge our development industry partners that made achieving the 2023 housing target possible. This slide illustrates the number of building permits that the city issued for new residential units. Record number of new residential units were created with a total of 3,985 units in 2023. 77% of the new residential units in 2023 were in the form of multiple dwellings. 2023 also saw a continued increase in the number of duplex dwelling units and detached additional dwelling units. The map here shows a distribution of new residential units that have been created within Kitchener's built-up area and designated greenfield area in 2023. In 2023, the intensification level, which is the percentage of new residential construction that occurs within the built-up area, was at 69%. Kitchener's 5-year average intensification level stands at 61%. This indicates that the city is on track to contribute towards, and in some years exceed, its intensification target of 60%. This slide summarizes the estimated densities in our intensification areas with the respective density targets. The estimated density of the urban growth center is 220 residents and jobs per hectare. Kitchener is on track to achieve the city's official plan minimum density target of 225 residents and jobs per hectare for the urban growth center by 2031. With the recent approval of Growing Together and subsequent phase of the project that is to follow, the protected major transit station areas will also be positioned to achieve their respective minimum density targets. Kitchener is estimated to house about 409,000 people and have about 170,000 jobs by 2051. With planned updates to land use and zoning within Kitchener's protected major transit station areas through the Growing Together project, the Enabling 4 Units project, land use reviews that will occur as part of Kitchener's official plan review over the next 2 years, and ongoing secondary plan work in the Dundee North area of Southwest Kitchener, there continues to be sufficient opportunities to accommodate this planned growth to 2051. It's important to note that the intensification and density targets are good indicators of planning objectives that we're trying to achieve, but are minimums, not maximums. We know that thriving and vibrant communities and neighborhoods are not simply created by meeting minimum targets, and there is a whole lot that goes beyond numbers. Crucial in our planning work is to plan for complete communities with a range of housing types, density, and a mix of uses. Growth in intensification areas, generally throughout the built-up area and in new planned communities, provides opportunities to create and continue to provide transit-supportive and walkable communities. And as we progress on these intensification density targets, we also advance our climate and affordability objectives. That concludes my presentation. We do have a recommendation that the report be used as a basis to fulfill our obligation regarding delegated approval authority with the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll look at questions of staff. Okay, I'm seeing none. Can I get a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Michaud. No comments. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. All right, there's an information item, but that doesn't require any direction. With that, can I get a motion for adjournment? Also, Councillor Michaud. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries.